Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast. The P.A.S. Report provides an honest analysis on the critical issues that matter to you without the biased media filters. Here's your host, Professor Nicholas Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano, and today I'm going to discuss a critical issue that is affecting America to a core because if it continues, the future for our children is bleak. This is an important episode, and it may explain this detachment that we're seeing. And what I'm going to be discussing is that this is serving as one of the main contributors to the problems we're witnessing in America. Some of you may have heard about the decline of civic education. You have the Department of Education that released the nation's report card. The data shows that student proficiency in American civics and history has hit a 30-year low, while some education officials want to blame the pandemic. The problem runs much deeper than that. They use the pandemic to escape culpability for their failures. I've been warning for over a decade about the decline in civic education. In fact, the 12th episode of this podcast was on the collapse of America's education system. So this is long before the pandemic actually hit. I have done numerous other episodes focusing on aspects of the education system. I also spoke about it with Tucker Carlson in September of 2019, then again in March of 2021. But even worse is how many of our educational institutions are now prioritizing a concept called global citizenship. They would rather push that than a strong understanding of America and American values. This is going on in K through 12. It's going on throughout college. The consequences of this decline are far-reaching. How can we expect America to thrive when our citizens lack the knowledge and appreciation of their own country? I'm going to explore the results of this decline in civic education, why it's happening, and what we could do to restore America and America's legacy. I want to get to the root causes of the problem and discuss the urgent need, because it is an urgent need, to revive America and the American identity. We need a renewed focus on what America actually stands for, what America actually means, and what's our role within the system. It's time that we ensure the next generation of Americans is equipped with the knowledge and understanding they need to lead the nation forward. What is happening is nothing short of disgraceful, and part of it is intentional. The attack on America and the American identity has been going on for years. It has far-reaching implications, and none of them are good. There are so many within the education system that seem to believe that an American-centric approach is akin to racism, xenophobia, ethnocentrism. But why? Why is that? What's the purpose behind it? Why are they pushing this concept of global citizenship, and what does that even mean? So that's what we're going to get into in this episode. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and visit the PAS Report website, pasreport.com. There you click on the latest articles, listen to previous episodes, follow me on social media, whatever you want to do. Now, I need to talk about three incidents that are important, and they actually tie into the point of this episode. First, you have the shooting in Allen, Texas. Mauricio Garcia, 33 years old, we still don't know that much. We do know that he was removed from the Army in 2008, and it was over mental health concerns. And I'm going to be interested to know what transpired in his life from 2008 up until the day of the shooting. There are reports that he engaged in white supremacist ideology. Then, over the same weekend, you had a Latino man, 34-year-old, extensive rap sheet, George Alvarez, running over people outside a migrant shelter, killing 8. Here is the interesting aspect. So you have investigators stating that Mauricio Garcia is motivated by white supremacist ideology. George Alvarez may have been motivated by anti-immigrant ideology. Apparently, white supremacy has outsourced their hate to non-white people, which, if it's true, that's extraordinarily dangerous. But we have to ask the question, why are so many detached from society and believe that they have the right to unleash carnage? That's the real question. These people have no regard for human life. And we have to get to the root cause of the issue because these incidents are increasing. It would be foolish not to recognize that. The other incident that I want to bring up is this case of the Marines subduing Jordan Neely on the New York City subway system, resulting in Neely's death. According to reports, Neely was threatening passengers and has a history of mental health issues. Again, so we see a commonality. Of course, the race hustlers immediately want to make it about race. You have people like Al Sharpton, who's nothing more than a race hustler looking to make a quick buck off this. You have protesters coming out in the street who want to be the judge, the jury, and the executioners. You have politicians like AOC exploiting Neely's death, trying to spark racial hatred. And this is a textbook case of an accidental death. Most of the outrage, it's based on false information. Neely has a long rap sheet. 30 years old, arrested 42 or 43 times. Some of these charges included violent assaults. And there are numerous reports that over the last few years, he has become more and more aggressive. They want to target the Marine, but where were the city officials? This is a person who posed a clear threat. And why do passengers on a subway going to and from work, minding their own business, why do they have to be subjected to constant threats, to constant harassment? In this day and age, why do we label the aggressors as the victims? And we see this day in, day out, not for nothing, but given what we pay in taxes, the one job that government is actually supposed to be responsible for, which is public safety, they fail dismally. And what are they failing dismally for? Well, they're failing dismally for this idea of equity, right? That's what it comes down to. They're pushing a political agenda that simply doesn't work. Something much bigger is going on here. And over the last couple of decades, there is a growing number of people who lack any real purpose in life. There's nothing that connects them to the broader society. And the problem is only getting worse. The sense of a lack of purpose ultimately leads to bitterness and resentment. It leads to detachment. It leads to a complete disregard for others and a disregard for human life. That's what we're seeing on a daily basis. Yet nobody seems to be alarmed about that. Nobody's calling that out. And instead, we're told we got to sit down. We have to shut up. That we can't judge other people. We can't judge what's going on. No, we can. We absolutely can. And some of you may be asking yourselves, Professor Giordano, how does this connect to the decline in proficiency in American history and civics? That's what you said at the beginning of the episode that you were going to talk about. So how does this connect to that? How is this connected to education? And aren't you stretching it? But what we are witnessing goes far beyond party politics. What we are witnessing goes far beyond a few misfits within society that aren't gelling. What we are witnessing is cultural rot. That's what we're witnessing out there. And so why is this cultural rot occurring? What's happening? And again, it goes back to the education system. Today, there's nothing that really links us together. There's no common bond, nothing that's bigger than self. We've isolated ourselves. We shut ourselves down. We don't engage in the community anymore. We're just a bunch of strangers living amongst each other in these communities. There's no ideals, no goals that exist. There's no type of shaming of what's proper behavior, what's acceptable behavior. Now, instead, they try and defend the unacceptable behavior that takes place. They make excuses for it. So why is this occurring? Well, it's because we don't teach about American government anymore. And so if nobody knows about the country that they're living in, how can we possibly be connected together? Listen, we're not like all the other countries around the world. We don't have thousands of years of recorded history. We don't have a shared culture. We don't have shared traditions, shared languages. We have none of that. The one thing that keeps the fabric of the United States together is the idea of America, is the American identity. But what happens when you marginalize the American identity so much, when you view the American identity as being racist and xenophobic, ethnocentric, bigoted, misogynistic, and any other label they could attach to it? What happens when you're constantly denigrating your own society, saying that it's a horrible country, that it's born in sin, and that the people that exist in it are horrible people? What do you think is going to happen? You're going to get this detachment. Most people don't even know how the system works. The American public education system was created with a specific intent. Now, most of you out there think it's all about, reading, writing, and mathematics. But do you really know why it was created? We have to start thinking deeper. Try and explain. Think in your minds. Why was this public education system created? Sure, it's meant to educate the students. It is meant to teach them how to read and write and do math. But that's not the reason. While the Founding Fathers didn't create the public education system, they acknowledged its importance. You have James Madison, who said a diffusion of knowledge is the only guardian of true liberty. Well, we don't even educate our students on what liberty actually means. Ask yourself, what is the difference between liberty and freedom? Can you define these important concepts? And we always talk about how important liberty is, right? We always talk about the freedoms. If it's so important, why don't we teach about it? Why don't we actually define it? You had John Adams, who said that children should be educated and instructed on the principles of freedom. Benjamin Rush, let our common people be compelled by law to give their children a good English education. This plain and general education alone will render the American Revolution a blessing of mankind. Noah Webster. Every child in America should be acquainted with his own country. He should read books that furnish him with the ideas that will be useful to him in life and practice. As soon as he opens his lips, he should rehearse the history of his own country. Yet only 11% of students are proficient in American history. 22% are proficient in civics. So when you begin to do some research, you're going to find that reading, writing, math, they were part of early curriculums, but they were not the central focus of those curriculums. The education system, the public education system, the father is Horace Mann, and he talked about the virtues of family, religion, manners, discipline, sense of community. Those were the central focus. How do you take all these different peoples from all these different places with all these different beliefs and create a sense of nationhood? That's where the public education system played an important role. It was the one that was creating this sense of nationhood between all these different peoples that were here in the United States. It's our education system that gives us our national identity, that holds the country together, that makes us feel a part of something. When you feel like you're a part of something, you work towards improving and advancing that something. When you feel detached and that you're isolated and alone, you aren't part of anything, and you begin to lash out. You begin to find other avenues to feel welcome, to feel wanted. It may be gangs, it may be white supremacist organizations, hate groups out there, but that's what happens when you're not holding the fabric of the country together. I always say the Great Seal of the United States, the national motto, e pluribus unum, one for many, out of many, one. When it comes to our system, we need to know our role within the system. What are our responsibilities to the system? What are our obligations to the system? It's not just to go out and vote. It's not just to go to jury duty when called upon. Through a civic education, we get a good citizenry, that there is a greater sense than self. Civics helps us understand that we have obligations. We have obligations to our family and faith. Well, think about what's happened in the family units. Think about what's happened when it comes to faith. Faith is routinely criticized, marginalized, attacked. We've seen the breakdown of the family. The same thing holds true. The nuclear family has been attacked. The amount of fatherless homes has been increasing dramatically. And this attack on family is designed. It's intentional. Why? Because if you destroy the family unit, well, then they say the community has to raise the kids. But if you don't really have a community, how can the community raise the kids? And if you don't have a community that is raising the children, what happens to those children? Well, they grow up, they become bitter, they become resentful, they begin to lash out. See, civics helps us in this matter. The founding fathers chose this idea of limited government for a reason. They understood the importance of limited government. They understood that as government grows and the power of government grows, the more abusive government becomes. The more we look to government to solve the problems that they're not really going to solve. There comes a point where the responsibility has to be on us. Teddy Roosevelt said success or failure will be conditioned upon the way in which the average man, the average woman, does his or her duty. First, in the ordinary, everyday affairs of life, family and faith. Next, in those great occasional crises which call for the heroic virtues. The average citizen must be a good citizen if our republic is to succeed. The main source of national power and national greatness is found in the average citizenship of the nation, not the actual government. But we've forgotten that. And the bonds have broken. So we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, I'll talk about how the bonds have broken, what's going on in academia, and what we need to do to actually rectify this situation. So hang tight, and we'll be right back. Listen up, P.A.S. report audience. Experts say that China is hoarding a massive amount of food. They're soon going to have over 2/3 of the globe's corn reserves, over half its rice reserves, and over half its wheat reserves. But when asked about it, China lies. And one expert says that they, of course, will never admit to doing something like that. Well, what does China know that we don't? When it comes to the global food shortages, China is the canary in the coal mine. And you have to understand, China is the world's #1 food importer. They rely on the rest of the world to keep their people fed, so they can't afford to mess up. There'll be riots, civil panic, or even worse, when over 1 billion people can't eat, it's going to create a crisis for them. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for Americans like me and you? Food shortages. That's why it's a smart idea to stock up on a kit of the best-selling 4 Patriot survival food. Create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriot survival food kits. It's hand-packed in the United States. The kits are compact, stack easily. They have different delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners, and I can attest to that because I use 4 Patriots, and their 5-star reviews on the website rave about the flavor and taste. Right now, you can get 10% off your first purchase of 4 Patriot survival food by typing in the code P.A.S. at checkout. Just go to 4patriots.com, use code P.A.S. to get 10% 10% off your first purchase of 4Patriot Survival Food. That's 4patriots.com. Use code PAS. Welcome back, everyone. And getting back to this idea of cultural rot and the detachment we're seeing from society, the lack of purpose that people feel in their lives, there's a prevalent trend that's going on throughout academia, both at the higher education level and the K through 12 level, where they are actively promoting the concept of global citizenship. And this objective has been integrated into the mission and vision statements of numerous educational institutions. Just check out your school. I guarantee you'll find this idea of global citizenship listed somewhere. See, the emphasis that they're trying to expand globalism, right? Internationalization. At the same time, they're reducing the emphasis on the nation-state concept. Those behind this push, they're the ones that think that national citizenship is an accident by birth. They place it within the framework of environmentalism and diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice. But this push towards the idea of global citizenry comes at the expense of America and the American identity. Across the country, we have witnessed growing anti-American sentiment permeate throughout academia, permeate from within this country, not from the international community. The latest example, it comes from the University of North Carolina. You have 673 university professors signing a letter opposing legislation that would require students to take courses in America's founding, the Constitution, some of the original documents. These professors want to argue that it violates their academic freedom. Not for nothing, I wish that they would show this same disdain that they show for the United States and American history and government and the requirements that we should be teaching this stuff. I wish they would show the same disdain for DEISJ initiatives, degree requirements that force students into classes that they don't want to take. That truly violates academic freedom. And all these classes do is promote a political agenda that's fueled by a toxic ideology. Students don't even know the very basics of our country. Instead of celebrating our unique history, instead of celebrating our accomplishments, you have students that are being taught to resent and even hate America by solely focusing on America's sins. Listen, we are a flawed nation. We are an imperfect nation. And we should be teaching the totality of American history, both the good and the bad. I'm not talking about sugarcoating anything. I'm not talking about ignoring our past sins. What I'm talking about is teaching what America is really about. Instead of promoting unity and understanding, they want to encourage victimhood and tribalism. They want to divide us along racial, ethnic, and ideological lines. But what if we don't fit neatly into these racial, ethnic, and ideological lines? In the past 2 decades, we've witnessed this shift away from the study of American government, civics, and history, and I'm on the front lines. I see it day in and day out. I see it. You know, it amazes me how many students are taught. I was asking my class this the other day. How many of you were taught in the K through 12 system, even maybe some college classes, that we have 3 co-equal branches of government? And nearly all of them raised their hand. But where did they get that from? We don't have 3 co-equal branches of government. In fact, in Federalist 78, Alexander Hamilton argued that the judicial branch is going to be the weakest branch of government. They recognized that. They understood that. You have students, again, front lines. They can't pass a basic citizenship exam. Only 16% of my students in a 12-year period can pass the citizenship exam. It's gotten worse and worse each year. Most can't differentiate between the Russian Constitution and the American Constitution. It's not unique to my classes. This is going on throughout the country. And as the shift is underway, what do we have colleges doing? Well, they're implementing speech codes, language guidelines. They're deeming words like founders and America as offensive. They strongly discourage their use. Like, how moronic do you have to be? So we're going to say that the word America is offensive? This absurdity has had disastrous consequences for our nation. And on a societal level, we are failing. This prioritization of global citizenship. Well, what is it? What does it mean? Now, if you ask these people, they're going to sit there, they're going to give you some pie-in-the-sky answer saying that we're all interconnected in today's day and modern world, and that we have to learn and have an appreciation for other peoples, other cultures, and learn our role within the international system. But is that really true? Is that what it does? Because they argue that, hey, we could still teach about America and the American identity, but obviously you haven't been teaching that. And so what it's designed to do is destroy the nation-state concept. It's designed to minimize America. If you're learning how to be part of a global citizen, but you don't know what it means to be an American citizen, you don't know the very basics of America, what's going to be the level of importance? Are you going to prioritize this idea of global citizenship over American citizenship and the American identity? And the answer is yes. Yes. This idea of global citizenship leads to a direct decline in students' commitment and loyalty to the United States because we know the United States is not being taught. You have colleges scrapping the Pledge of Allegiance. If you bring up the word nationalism, they'll be like, oh, that's a far-right ideology. White nationalism. No, nationalism is not based on the color of one's skin. If you look at the word nationalism, it has nation built in there because nationalism is built on the nation-state complex. And before the nation-states emerged, loyalty was to a leader, wasn't to this idea of a country. With the emergence of the nation-state, the loyalty is to a country. And it doesn't mean you can't criticize I criticize our government day in, day out. Week after week, I criticize our government. I criticize the politicians. I criticize the bureaucrats. I will never hold back. I will constantly ask questions. That's my role as a citizen. I will push back on policies. Why do they need to do these policies? What are the unintended consequences? What's their motivation? But see, they take words and they begin to redefine them, right? So now they look at nationalism. Now, nationalism is something that's important. Nationalism is part of this idea that gives us the sense of nationhood, that we are linked together through shared common values, the American values. And this idea of nationalism, it sets standards within a society. What's acceptable behavior? What's not acceptable behavior? What's right? What's wrong? Nationalism fuels what's called patriotism, but patriotism's bad, right? It's funny because when I used to talk about nationalism, people would say, well, why do you have to use the word nationalism? Why can't you use the word patriotism? And I would explain, I am not going to let people redefine words. I'm not going to let them get away with that. And the reason that I won't do that is because if I let them redefine what nationalism really is, and listen, you could exploit nationalism for negative intent. You could exploit nationalism for nefarious purposes. I'm not denying that. But I stated nationalism helps societies. If the people within the society don't feel any connection to their society, it devolves into chaos and anarchy. And I explained how if they get rid of nationalism, well, next thing you know, they're going to be attacking patriotism. And that's exactly what's happened. They want to redefine what patriotism means, right? Where patriotism is now equated with racism, further eroding the value of the American identity. And we see the results. You have a recent Wall Street Journal poll which found that 38% of Americans consider patriotism to be very important. That's it. Patriotism is essential within a society. Patriotism is what motivates us to help our fellow citizens, particularly in times of need, not through forced coercion of government, but because we have empathy, we have compassion, we have sympathy towards our fellow citizens. And continuing down this road will further weaken our national identity. It will lead to a breakdown in social cohesion. And that brings me back to the examples I gave you earlier in the episode, because that's exactly what you're witnessing. You are witnessing a breakdown in the social cohesion of society because we moved away from the American identity. And as we moved away from the American identity, I have to ask each and every one of you, is our society better off? Is your life, is your individual life better off today than it was? The answer is no. We recognize that. We might not want to say it out loud. We might want to try and be quiet about it. But we recognize it's a disaster. We recognize something's thoroughly wrong. Well, if you don't push this idea of global citizenship, you're a bigot. You don't like other cultures and you're xenophobic because you don't want to understand where those cultures are coming from. No, there's certain things in other cultures that I don't need to understand. Please explain to me why I should have to understand and respect cultures that promote throwing homosexuals off rooftops. Why do I have to understand that? Why do I have to respect that? I don't. Why do I have to understand or respect when dogs are tortured for hours on end and that the longer the dog lasts throughout the torture, the better fortune you're going to have in life? No, I don't have to understand that. They keep saying that it's important to understand and respect other cultures. But what if part of the culture is engaged in human sacrifice as a tradition? Why do I have to understand that? Why do I have to say that that deserves respect? It really is stunning. And then when you tie them down, when you pin them down by asking these questions, they'll sit there and they'll say, well, it's important to understand and respect other cultures because it helps us develop a greater appreciation for diversity, promotes mutual understanding and cooperation. However, it's also important to recognize that some cultural practices can be harmful. They can violate basic human rights, and these practices should be condemned. So then don't sit there and tell me that I have to respect all the other cultures out there. There are certain ones that you respect. Listen, I'm a student of history. There's a lot of elements of other cultures that I've learned about that I have a high, profound respect for. But at the same time, we have to understand that you can criticize cultural practices. You can call for a strong America. You can call for a strong American identity. That's not racist. It's not ethnocentric. It's not xenophobic. I prefer to live in a strong country where the people in that country actually coexist well together, where the people in that country believe in their fellow citizens, where they actually have some regard for human life of their fellow citizens. Cultural understanding and respect are important, but they should never be used to justify or excuse any type of harmful practice. But that's what they want everyone to do with this idea of global citizenship. They don't think anything through. See, to them, it's all about narratives. It's all about feel-good words, a word salad that absolutely means nothing in the end. Because guess what? If it all collapses here, do you think this concept of global citizenship is going to help you? And it is collapsing here. Americans should know their place in the world. Americans should know their place in America first. When you have students that cannot pass a basic citizenship exam, when they can't identify the United States Constitution, it's obvious they are not being taught about America. They're not being taught about American values or their roles within the system. I've been teaching for nearly 20 years, for nearly 2 decades, and I've been witnessing this decline firsthand. In order to fix the problem, we have to stop the cultural rot that's occurring. We have to give people, particularly the young, a sense of purpose in life, that there's something, a greater sense of self out there. We have to give them something to believe in, because when they don't know why they exist, when there's nothing that links them to the broader society, when they don't have that sense of purpose, you create a dangerous void. And unfortunately, there are a lot of very unstable people out there. And that void is going to be filled by something else. And it's never going to be good. So understand, the failures within the education system, when it comes to the idea of America and the American identity, it's amazing because we focus so much on STEM programs, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and I get it. I understand why, right? Every great civilization, they led in these fields as they rose up and had their power. But we actually downplay America and American identity, which is interesting, right? I mean, think about it logically. Now, first of all, social studies, history is not political science. They are 2 separate subject fields. Yes, they may piggyback off each other, but they're 2 separate subject fields. But it amazes me how literally every aspect of your life involves government. Every aspect of your life involves government. Doesn't matter what you're going to do, what career field you're going into. When you're purchasing a home, you have to deal with government. When you want to make renovations to home, you have to deal with government. When you go to fill up your car with gas, you're dealing with government. When you go to get a career, you got to get licensed, you're dealing with government. When you look at educational institutions, licensed by the schools, accreditation, you have accrediting agencies, all have to be registered with the states and whatnot. So when you look at all that, every aspect of our life involves government, and it's the something that we know the least about. Don't you find that a little disturbing? So that's what we need to fix. Fixing that can solve the problem of cultural rot. So they are connected. And as many people want to say that they're not connected, that's a lie. They are connected. I hope you found the content of this episode important. I hope you found it informative. If you did, please share it with your family, friends, and on social media. I also appreciate if you take 30 seconds, write a review on any podcast platform that allows it, leave a 5-star rating. I want to thank you for joining me today. I'll be back on Monday with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast.
Have a good one. Bye.
Be sure to rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Also, visit PASreport.com and follow us on Twitter at PAS Report.